The flow of the presentation today is going to be an introduction to who Quorum Labs is as a company, and then we'll talk a little bit about the problems that folks have today in the areas of disasters and business continuity. Then we're going to spend a little bit of time on generically what are some of the different options for how to deal with management through disasters. Disasters being a very broad term, obviously. Then we'll talk about our specific product called the OnQ appliance. You can see a picture of it here. And then we'll finish up with a short product demonstration. So company background first. Quorum Labs has been around for several years. We were spun off from a larger company that does a lot of IT, consulting, and integration work for the government. And the idea of our company came from one of their projects that they were working on. It was eventually commercialized, and our product was formally launched about 1.5 years ago. We've been growing really fast, typically around 30 to 35% sequential growth. We have a sample customer list here. We have customers across a variety of industries, from energy, manufacturing, transportation, financial services, law firms, etc. And we've gotten lots of awards on the product. Unfortunately, disasters still are in the news these days with the strange tornadoes in Massachusetts last week, a bunch across the Midwest and the South, all the way back to the tsunamis in Japan. So disasters have been around for quite a while. Again, that can be a broad term, and you can think about something. We have a picture of the little red oops key. Technically, disasters can be really anything that interrupts operations. In this case, we're talking about servers in the data center. So someone just erroneously, hitting a button or doing something they didn't mean to and shutting down a server or a group of servers can also be included in this. So business continuity and disaster recovery, managing those challenges is nothing new, but the ability for people to effectively meet those don't seem to be getting much easier. That's part of the reason why we were launched as an organization, is we think we've built a better mousetrap. And so we have a bullet point list here. Well, what are some of the things that are out there that make this stuff a challenge, right? And if you look at the bottom one, just simply with this economy doing more with less, even if you work with a growing company, oftentimes they're still asking you to do more and more and more with less. A lot of our customers, the same folks who are responsible for keeping the servers running, are also fielding desktop support tickets and everything else. They're wearing a bunch of different hats. One of the challenges, if you move up a few bullet points, is just testing backups. And there's various surveys out there that say that really only about a quarter or a third of the time or less are people actually testing their backups to make sure they work. This is another symptom or sign of symptoms that people just have way too much on their plate. Everybody we've talked to, I'm sure you guys are probably in the same boat, people don't skip testing backups because they're lazy or they don't feel like doing it. They do that because they just have to prioritize how many hours they have in their day, right? So if the CEO has the blue screen of death, are you going to work on their computer, or are you going to test your backup from last week or last night, right? Rolling out patches to production before you test them. A lot of people have done that before. Most of the time it works well. Sometimes they run into conflicts on their servers, kill a server, etc. Again, it's not from just being careless or flippant with just doing things without thinking about it. It's just honestly trying to prioritize all the things they have on their plate. So the next slide encompasses the same type of information from the executive suite's perspective. So what this is a consulting company surveyed the business owners, president, owner, CEO, in mid-market size organizations, and said, how long can you have an outage, like a server outage or something like that, where your business is interrupted? How long can that be the case before it has a serious effect on your business itself? And 17% of the people said immediately. Another almost 40% said, well, we can be down for about an hour and then we're going to run into trouble. And then another 20% said, well, we can be down for up to about 3 hours and then we're going to run into big trouble. And the point here is, if you notice the note at the bottom of that box, if these organizations these executives answer this question. If they are only doing backup today and they don't have any sort of high availability or DR solution in place for their data center, the business owner's objectives for continuity are really impossible to be met, right? If you lose a server, how long is it going to take you to rebuild that server from a backup, even if the backup works correctly? Easily a couple hours. Sometimes it can be longer than that depending on what else is going on. And the reason we point this out is an awful lot of the market today really only has tape backup or some sort of backup solution and doesn't have any sort of high availability solution in place. So the next couple slides we're going to go through are, well, what are some of those, what are some of the products out there available to you? And the first one I just kind of hinted at is there are some pretty good backup solutions out there. And there's various products that do it. The one downside of that, I just again hinted at that, is, and everybody I'm sure probably knows this, is the process of recovering from one of those backups when you have some sort of server failure or disaster is very time and resource intensive. And depending on what you have that you have to restore from and how, it can take several hours and more than a day. So when you start talking about continuity and high availability, what's that going to do to your organization if your Exchange server is down for 6 hours? Or, you know, something related to your ability to process transactions or invoices or what have you. One step further to backup is cloud backup. And this is, cloud in general has gotten a lot more hype these days. Cloud solution for backup is good in some ways in that storage grows and grows and grows, right? And if you use a cloud vendor, you don't have to constantly be worrying about, do you need to buy more infrastructure to manage and keep all that storage that you need? You don't have to worry about that with the cloud. They do that for you. That's why they're in business. The problem that it exacerbates, though, again, comes back to recovery. And we put on here an example. The city of New Orleans was using a cloud-based service and did not realize at one point that they were not backing up the way they thought they were. And they were busy, so they weren't testing their backups, which, again, is made more problematic by the cloud. How do you test your backups? So last, I believe it was November, their main server that stored all their title records crashed, and they had no way to recover from that. Even if they would have actually been doing the backups of that server and were ready to recover from the cloud, the process of doing that, there's no easy way. It's just physics. There's no easy way to restore 500 gigs or 2 terabytes or what have you across the web, right? They're going to have to ship you a DVD, so you'll be down at least until the next day. Hopefully that'll be it if they send you the correct information you asked for. Otherwise, you'll have to go through another iteration and have them send you another DVD in the mail. So the whole notion of high availability is still made challenging via the cloud. Another option we'll throw out here is the notion of virtual site recovery using something like replicated SANs and virtualization. And I personally always refer to this as kind of like the industry standard. And the reason I say that is the larger the number of servers someone has that we talk to, 50, 100, 200, 500, the higher the odds are they already have something like this in place. So they'll have a storage area network or a SAN on site. They'll have another one off site. They will have virtualized their servers. And they'll set up replication in something like VMware Site Recovery Manager to give them high availability if they have some sort of problem, and also DR with that site-to-site replication. The challenge of that is, number one, just the sheer number of moving parts you have to have. First of all, you have to virtualize all of your machines. Any servers you can't virtualize or don't virtualize can't be included in this. You have to purchase multiple SANs. You have to set up the replication. There's typically a lot of professional services and training. And VMware has, they actually have a link on their website we can send you rather than send you the actual document, as it's 14 megs. But they have a best practice white paper around setting these things up for business continuity and disaster recovery, and it's 230 pages long with 700 lines of scripts. It doesn't necessarily mean you have to do it exactly that way, but the point is, you put yourself in the place of someone when a disaster happens. When the pressure cooker is on, not only have you spent a lot of money, but what are the odds that you'll be able to actually implement and use this stuff the right way and be able to test your backups and test your DR strategy along the way in a meaningful fashion. So what we're trying to do with our product is bring an enterprise class high availability and DR solution to the market, but packaged in a way that people can afford and packaged in a way that's simple enough that people can actually use and manage. So our solution is called OnQ. It's an appliance-based, one-click site recovery solution. And you'll see this in a minute in the demo. Literally, you push one button, and you can fire up what we call a recovery node. You can think of this as essentially a replicated data center in a box. So what we're doing is automating all of the different moving parts that typically come into play for these sorts of solutions all into one box. So backup, this is a full backup solution in here in addition to the other stuff I've talked about just as one example. The idea is, okay, well, why do we package this thing as an appliance? Well, there's a lot of benefits to the appliance. Like I mentioned, you don't have to buy blade servers, stands, set up professional services, server and database licenses, none of that. Another one I like to point out is the one throat to choke. So imagine you're sitting there and you're using a product and you get some weird error, some software product, and you don't know, did you just do something wrong? Or are you in the wrong place in the application? Or is there a bug in the software? Did something get corrupted in the database? Is it a hardware issue? Well, with an appliance, we're responsible for everything. So it doesn't matter what the problem is. You contact us, and we're responsible for it all. So again, simplifying things, and especially if you're in the middle of a disaster or some sort of challenge like that, you're not going to be faced with a bunch of vendors pointing fingers at each other saying, no, I think it's a hardware problem, you need to call them. We've got 3 sample servers sitting here at the bottom, red, green, and blue. And the next slide is we're going to show you how this is set up. It's kind of the first foray into the technical part of it. So one of the things you do when you plug in the appliance is you give it an IP address. The next thing you'll do is from those servers you want to protect, you hit the interface of the appliance. And you'll see a little blue, you probably can't read it, but there'll be a blue button in the browser that says Protect Me. You push that button, and it'll install the agent onto your production servers. We don't care if the servers that you want to protect are physical, which again, that's a departure from some of your options like virtualization and replicated SANs, right? We don't care if the servers are still physical or virtual. We also don't care what type of hardware the servers are or what type of hypervisor you're using if they're virtual. So it can be Dell, HP, IBM, or from a virtualization standpoint, it can be VMware, Microsoft, Citrix, Zen, doesn't matter. Our agent lives at the OS level. We have Linux in the roadmap for the next dot release, I believe. And until then, it's Windows only. The next step is you will define how often do you want these agents to check into the appliance. And think of this as the high availability or the HA appliance that's sitting in your office where your servers are. If you have multiple offices with multiple servers, you'll probably have an appliance in each office with those servers. So these check-ins can be as fast as every 15 minutes or as slow as once a day. When those agents check in, they're going to do an incremental, what has changed on me since the last time I checked in. It'll dedupe it, and it will send that down to the appliance. The appliance does another level of dedupe where it says, okay, well, let me also check this against what files I may already have from the other servers I'm also protecting. And then it creates a full, complete backup of that server. Not one piece of the puzzle like applications or anything, a full, complete backup. And we store them chronologically. These appliances go from 5.5 terabytes of disk space up to 20 terabytes. and you can have more than one appliance. So typically people are storing 30 to 60 days worth of data depending on the capacity. There is also an optional archiving add-on that we're updating in the next dot release. The other thing that this does, in addition to storing the backups, is it uses those backups to build what we call a recovery node. It's a full, complete virtual copy of that production server. So you're running along, and all of a sudden, let's say a disk fails or something, and you have a problem with the server. If the heartbeat, so to speak, between the agent and the appliance is broken, you'll get an email alert. And you can go research it, and maybe you find out, oh man, this is something catastrophic. We're going to be down for 6 hours or some extended period of time. We'll show you this in the demo in a minute. You go into the interface, you push a button, and the recovery node is powered up. It's identical to the production server down to the IP address. So literally the only thing you have to do is push that button, and the only amount of time that you're down is how long it takes that recovery node to boot up, which is usually just a minute or two. Once that recovery node is running, you're back in business. That recovery node then becomes the protected node. And what that means is we start then doing backups of it every 15 minutes or every hour or whatever the frequency was, so that when you're ready to fail back to the production server, you'll have that incremental information to fail back to, and you'll retain what's happened between then and now and not lose it all. We do support bare metal restore. We do have incremental failback. You can recover individual files and folders and so on. Most of the time, our customers have a 2-appliance solution. In addition to the HA or high availability on-site where your servers are, they also have an appliance off-site or at a different office location in the case of a disaster or a whole site outage. The concept is the same. There's only a few settings that are different. Basically what happens is the HA appliance is also continually sending those incremental dedupes, compressed and encrypted, over to the DR appliance, which is the top one here on the slide, where the DR appliance then is continually building those backups and those recovery nodes. And you can set up bandwidth constraints and things like that between the 2 appliances if you need to. So then what happens if a utility accidentally cuts power to your site? Obviously our HA appliance is going to provide no value there because your power is down everywhere, and our appliance is going to be no different than your production servers that you lost. So in that case, you would go to our DR appliance and fire up 1 or however many recovery nodes at the same time you want. And again, these can be very beefy appliances. Our largest one has 128 gig of RAM, 12 CPU cores, 4 different gig Ethernet ports. So you can run, multiple dozens of these recovery nodes in unison if you need to. So this is an architecture diagram. I talked through a lot of it, but there is one thing I wanted to point out. These are your hypothetical production servers over here. This is your HA appliance. This is your DR appliance. The other thing I wanted to point out is that we also have a private internal test network on the appliance. So if you have people that come in that do audits and they say things like, prove to me, that your backups work, you can boot up a recovery node, and there's a Java remote interface built right into the application where you can go in and do all kinds of tinkering around and anything that you want to show them or show yourself, right? If you want to test patch installations on a server before you roll to production, same thing. Fire up a recovery node in a private test network, do whatever you want to with it. You can either keep what you did or trash it. So that's a nice feature. And in addition to that, you can actually put those on a schedule. You can say every night at 3 in the morning, I want to boot up all my recovery nodes and be sent a report as to if they all booted up okay. That may be all that you need. It may not in terms of testing your backups, but certainly it's a nice level of automation to say, hey, at least all of these recovery nodes did boot up and we're ready to go. Last slide here. One of our mantras is with simplicity comes reliability. Murphy's Law will say something like a disaster will happen when your most senior person is on vacation or out of the state, or it's the middle of the night on the weekends or whatever. How confident are you, based on the simplicity of the product, that you can actually get it to work when you need it the most? And actually, it's kind of a morbid story, but to go back quite a ways back here, if you remember the story about the city of New Orleans, they were unable to conduct real estate transactions for 3 months because their server that had their title records died. They actually had people that lost their jobs, like the CIO lost their jobs because of this particular product or project or issue. They spent well into 6 figures in all kinds of forensic data recovery and all kinds of other stuff to fix the problem. So, it's a little bit of a morbid story, but, a real story nonetheless. So, with simplicity comes reliability. We try to make the browser, the interface, just as easy as the whole product is packaged. It's a tabbed UI, drop-down menus, checkboxes, radio buttons. There's no custom scripting or anything like that. So I'm going to switch over to the interface. And I'm going to log in. This is just a demo appliance back at our headquarters. We have 3 hypothetical servers here that we're protecting. And you can see green with the white up arrow means that those 3 servers are running, which is good. Over here on the right, we see a green circle with a white up arrow for the recovery node status. What that means is they are in good, healthy shape and ready to run. It doesn't necessarily mean that they're running right now. And if I mouse over it, I can see some information about when the last backup ran, etc. This is just a browser. So any device that has a browser that you can connect to the appliance from, you can do anything here that you're seeing me do. So if you have an iPhone or something like that, you can just get on it, power up a recovery node in the instance of a problem or anything along those lines. If I go over to the Recovery Nodes tab, now I will see the actual power state of the 3 recovery nodes. And we see a red circle with a white arrow pointing down, meaning they're down. And there's different things that happen in the life of these recovery nodes. As a backup is running, you might see a sideways arrow. As it's building the actual recovery node, you'll see it along with the progress bar. And then if I were to pick one of these 3, you'll see that there's actually a couple different places to do this. This isn't the only screen that I can power up a recovery node. And we do that for good reason. When the proverbial, fill in the blank hits the fan, we don't want our customers struggling with figuring out which screen and which button to push. So we try to make it very easy, and you can do these things in more than one spot. So I've picked the Exchange server, and I've got a choice here. I can power it on the test network, or I can power it on the production network. And I'm going to pick the test network, and you'll see here's an example of some of the visual tools. So you can see it's yellow right now with the green up arrow. That means that it's booting up. And in a real-world scenario, it'll take a minute or 2. And then over here on the right, you'll see console. This is a nice little Java console where I can remote into that box and do things if I want to. All right, and there it is up and running. Thanks again for your time, everybody, and have a good rest of the day.